Yo Patreon tribe, welcome to another Patreon exclusive, and today's exclusive is an exclusive. This is one of the early G.I. Joe mail-away exclusives, and I thought, well, since this guy was never sold in stores, maybe we'll make him an exclusive for Patreon too, just for the Patreon tribe. So he was one of the top 5 mail-away G.I. Joe offers on this past weekend's top 5 list, and we're going to go in-depth today. I've got Stalker riding this thing because Stalker is on that original mail order pamphlet. So even though Stalker wasn't included, some vehicles just have a certain driver that seems right for it, like Breaker on the Ram and Stalker on the Manta. So one of the things that I've never noticed about this thing, I didn't have it when I was a kid, but just in doing the review, and Sean also mentioned that he noticed it, and a couple other people too, just with that 360 picture that I posted, that there's a Manta. There's a Manta ray cut into the sail, which like I always knew there's a hole there so that the riders can reach through either side to get at the gun, whether they're left-handed or right-handed. But I had never noticed before that they cut it in the shape of a manta ray. Here's a manta ray from, I believe it was Hydro Viper from a few years after this. But that is a cool little detail, and G.I. Joe never ceases to amaze me. All these little details that they put in these vehicles, still finding details after all these years. So the manta ray in the initial offer, these are American prices, was $1, and we've got 5 flag points over here. These are repro flag points, not original flag points. I used up all my flag points on mail offers back in the day. And then the manta ray was offered later on for even, well, less and more. Instead of $1, it was $1.75, but you only had to include 2 flag points instead of 5, so there's a little bit of a trade-off there. And the prices were a little different in Canada as well, just a little bit more because the Canadian dollar was a little weaker than the American dollar. So before we get to actually collapsing this thing and fitting it in this giant oversized backpack, I wanted to go through the blueprints, which are available on 3djoes.com. And these blueprint breakdowns are one of my favorite things to go through because it really takes me back to my childhood when I would open up the blueprints and go down the whole list and learn about the vehicle. It wasn't just about playing around with the vehicle, it was about learning the engineering and the mechanics of it. So big thanks to 3D Joes for scanning all these and putting them online. Now everyone gets to have them and enjoy them. Number 1 is the mast flotation cap, which is at the very top here. It's not actually a separate piece. And number 2 is the low stretch main sail. So that's that whole vinyl sail, and this one is in really good shape. The first Manta I got, the sail wasn't in too good a shape, so I just picked up another one because these did not go for very much on eBay a couple of years ago. I think they still are pretty affordable, so you should be able to find yourself a really nice one if you want to get one in nice condition. Number 3 is the disassembly tool. And so number 3, let's move the Manta this way. And this guy right here, this thing right here is the disassembly tool. So all these details maybe you didn't pick up in the top 5 list. That is a not removable, sculpted in thing, but that's how you disassemble the Manta. Number 4 is the aid kit, first aid kit. So this little box right here, I guess you could just stick a little red cross on there. Most Joe vehicles had first aid kits. Number 5 is the 30 cal rapid fire machine gun, and we don't really have to hunt that down. That's pretty obvious where that is. That's this guy right here, 30 cal, and it attaches with a clip onto the boom, which allows you to move it forward and backward, customize it to wherever you want to put your figure on. There's multiple pegs on here. There's one here, and then another on the side. So you can have left-handed, right-handed Joes. I mean, I guess you could stick 3 Joes on here because there's 3 pegs, but this to me is a one-person windsurfer. I don't really think it's intended to have more than one. It's like a surfboard. You don't really see multiple people riding a surfboard. So I think the pegs are more there just to give you the freedom of where you want your figure to be, rather than a 3-person troop transport. So this gun is very similar to Stalker's gun, and for a long time I thought it was Stalker's machine gun, but it's not. It's similar, but it is a completely different mold. And just going to show you here, it's a little bigger, a little thicker, similar in shape, but definitely not Stalker's gun. Oh, another cool little discovery. I always thought that was just kind of a repurposed Stalker or Duke machine gun. And number 6 is the quick release pin. So let's see, number 6, quick release pins, is over on this little extra thing right here. So another thing that doesn't actually do anything, but with your imagination it does. Number 7 is pretty self-explanatory. It's the missile, which is removable. And number 8 is the missile launch. So it's not enough to just have a missile there. This is what launches it. The detailing in here, I'll give you a better look at this, since we didn't really get a good close-up of it in the top 5. Great detailing there. All sorts of computer gadgets. The missile doesn't really sit in there all that well. It's kind of got the same problem as the Polar Battle Bear missiles. You push it in, but it just naturally wants to lift up. It still holds on there okay. It's not quite as bad as the Battle Bear, but not quite as snug as some G.I. Joe missiles. And number 9 is the MANTA window. So that hole right there is so that if you choose to have a figure on the other side, he can reach through the hole and still get at the gun. Now, I tried to do some research and find out what's the proper way to put a figure on here and have him grab onto the boom and the gun. And because there's no official box art, there's no box for this thing, there's really no final word on where the figure's supposed to go. So if some self-proclaimed expert out there says the figure has to go this way on this peg, holding it this way, just, I would say, quietly walk away from them, because they are far too sure of a not sure thing. You just put them wherever you want. Number 10 is the machine gun. So it's got another weapon. Machine gun remote control. I thought there was another gun molded in here somewhere. You never know. Machine gun remote control is this thing, apparently. I always wondered what this thing was, and Blueprints to the rescue. Machine gun remote control. So you could have your figure hanging back near the back of the boom, because when you're surfing, sometimes you got to move around your surfboard. And if you can't get to the gun, that's kind of a cool idea. You still shoot the gun from way back. These things are fragile. Of the 2 Mantas I have, this broke off of one of mine. So if there's one piece I think to watch on here, these are okay. The vinyl sail, this never really feels like it's going to tear if I take it apart. It's this part right here. It's so flimsy. Feels even flimsier than the wires that go into Flash or Breaker's backpacks. So that's the one to watch. And Number 11 is the outrigger supports. Let's see, number 11, outrigger supports. Those guys right there that hold. And I want to know what this thing is called, so I wonder if they're going to tell us. Number 12 is the twin rail boom. So that thing right here, this thing that connects to the sail, that's called a boom right here. That's the part you hold on to. And number 13 is the mooring latch. That right there, that's a mooring latch. I wanted to know what this thing was though, this extra little sail. It's interesting. They don't really have a name for it. So the extra little side board, kind of like that, I think it's like a pontoon on Stalker's canoe for balance. But doesn't seem as though there's an actual term for it in the blueprints. So that's the manta ray. I really like how it kind of rocks back and forth when you tap it. There is a curve to it. And the other part that came with the manta ray is the backpack, which is huge. And it's got a little connector right here. You just press that in and you can open the whole thing. And you need to be able to open it in order to get the sail pole part into these little circular parts, and you seal it back up. So the nice thing about it is you don't have to just set it aside. Your figure can actually have the backpack on while he's sailing. It is really, really big though. So we'll just set that aside for now and show you a couple of different options for how to display your figure on the Manta. So there's a foot peg right here. You can stick the foot in there. You want to give the figure a little bit of a bend in their knees. And let's see, there's the Manta hole right there, so you can reach through, and that's kind of dangerous right here. You don't want Stalker shooting his hand off, so if he's on this other side, I think it's better to push the gun up past the end of the boom, and then he can sort of be hanging onto the sail while he's reaching through. One thing you probably don't want to do is put the Joe's hand on the actual gun handle. This thing is, I think, a little thicker than most Joe weapons, and so I've always just done that, had it over top of the handle rather than risk breaking a thumb on it. So that's one way to go on that side, reaching through the Manta hole. Not really the way I usually display it. And then another way, you gotta turn the head in the direction that he's surfing, and Stalker is a great figure for that. Some figures don't have all that great of a range for turning left and right, but Stalker does, so he's actually a great one. And he's really nicely color coordinated with it too. The lighter green parts of Stalker are a very close match to the Manta itself, so that's a nice match there. And then if you want him hanging near the back of the Mantad, if you want to pronounce the silent D, again, you don't really want to stick this in a vintage figure's hand because you might break that thumb off, so it's good enough to just have the hand. I mean, he's not really grabbing anything, really. It's more the foot that's holding than the hands. But just stick that up into his hand. That's a little tougher to get looking right using the little remote thing, especially since it's kind of fragile. So it's a cool option, but it's just hard. It's hard to do. This is how I always display my figures. I'll have the gun up forward a little bit. I'll have the hand on the gun, and then the other hand either on the boom or on the back of the gun. Stick that foot there. You can't really get 2 feet, like each foot onto a peg. It's they're not really spaced out that way. But something like that is good enough. He's pulling back. I really like how that looks. He's pulling back on it, leaning back. Give this a good shake. He's not going to fall off. There's some balancing going on there. So that's, for me, that's really the only option for how to display a G.I. Joe on the Manta. Looks like he's really leaning into the wave there. And if you're wondering if the modern figures are compatible with the Manta, they are. Takes a little bit of finagling, but they have enough range, posability in their feet in order to get on there. Now, the modern figures have different holes in their feet, so you're not going to be able to stick him on a peg, but they can, because they have these rubbery hands, they can actually hold onto the boom, clip it in there, and the gun too, without breaking the thumbs off. So this is one of the rare cases where I think the modern figures are even better than the vintage figures with the vintage vehicle. That looks awesome. He's got a good bend in his knees. He's really leaning in. He's holding onto the gun really well, so it's not just kind of hand close to the gun. It's on there. He's holding onto the boom. So I really like how that looks. The modern figures definitely, I think, work with the Manta much better. All right, we're going to break this baby down now, and I'm actually going to use my spare Manta to do that, just because I don't want to be taking this nice, really kind of minty condition vinyl sail apart too much, risking tearing it. The weird thing is, with this second Manta that I have, the printing is on the other side. They're inverted. The camo should be on this side, right? That's the way. I was double checking to make sure I didn't put this backwards on one of them, but I mean, it's cut the exact same way. The Manta is going in that direction. The holes are in the right spot. It's just it's flipped for some reason. Not sure why. I don't know how many of them are like that. But some of the Mantas the camo's printed on one side, and on some of them it's printed on the other side. So let's break this guy down. And you can see on this one the remote little wire, whatever that thing was, broke off on this one. So the first thing you can do is unclip the gun, and it's clipped on there really good. And the boom it's not as thin as that remote wiring, but you don't want to really reef on it, so it's best to just try to pull it right off instead of, you know, snap it off like that. There is nice give in this boom though, so it's not that liable to break. And there's the machine gun. We take off the supports over here, take those apart. They pull out like that. Just attach with these little pegs, and depending on how much space is in here, we might leave the missile on there or take it off. We'll decide that later. And the surfboard just pulls apart like that. So it's just held in with these little bumps, and it holds nice and secure too. But that's really nicely designed. You're not going to break that. The only thing you're going to break is if you reef on it up or straight down, you're going to break these tabs off. But if you always just pull out and push in, there's no reason why these tabs would break. So we're almost there. We just have to pull out this. You can see really no danger in breaking this either. It just pushes in and pushes out. It's kind of like a gun in a Transformer's hand. And it's in a X, in a cross symbol just to give it a little give. So again, really, really good design. Instead of just being a peg that would wear out like some Transformers weapons do, they've thought of everything. So now we want to start removing the vinyl sail, and that's the part you want to be really careful with. Just gently lift it off. Pull this off. You can see how thin this is. And it's no wonder that a lot of these have torn over the years, because you don't have to stretch it much, but just a little bit too much and you're going to tear it. So we got it removed from the main part. We'll pull this apart. That just attaches like that. And the boom just pulls out from the main pole part. And then we remove the last part. That's the tricky part. The vinyl sail is attached not just to the pole, but to the boom too. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 places this thing is likely to tear. 6 if you include the MANTA. So yeah, it's no wonder so many of these have been damaged. And this too, I really like this connection point here. You see how this kind of, what's it called, a mushroom peg or something like that? Makes it easy to pop in, and it gives it just a little bit of grip so that it's not going to pop out. So now we have to fill up the backpack. So let's open the backpack up, and you can't really open it unless you push this in right here. So it's going to hold. It's not going to pop open while it's on your figure's back, which is nice. Just the amount of thought that went into these vintage designs, you don't see it anymore these days. Now, how are we going to attach these? So there's 2 spots to hold the poles. And I mean, there's different ways to do it. Again, if there's someone who says, no, there's only this one way to do it, I tend to disagree. I think with the MANTA, that's kind of like Lego. You come up with your own ideas. So maybe if we put this one here, you're not going to really get anything symmetrical when you're putting these away, but you don't really want something like this where one pole is way up high. It almost looks like an antenna, like from a radio pack. But let's open this up a bit, and these little connectors to the vinyl sail can get caught. But if we do, maybe if we go the other way, it'll look a little nicer. Yeah, like that. We want to try to disperse the weight as much as possible. So that looks pretty good. And now we stick the parts in the backpack. So we take the sail, it just fits, just barely fits. We take the second part of the sail, and I guess you could put it in this way if you want to show off as much of the sculpting as possible. It's there, so if you're going to store it like this, why not? As far as how everything else goes, it's up to you. There's really no sequence of how this stuff goes in. You can just stick it in any way that it fits. Let's put that like that little side floaty deal. The missile, because it pops off so easily, I would just stick it in there so that you don't lose it. And then these little connectors, figure out where they go. This thing, because it's so thin, I usually leave it to the end to decide what to do with it. Stick that in there. Stick that in there. This is opening up, so I've, it's like Jenga. Trying to figure out how to get everything to fit in here. Maybe this guy here. Maybe this guy here. That's holding. That thing right there. Now we got a missile. to put in. You don't really want your missile to be loose in there, but everything is nice and tight in there. And then you just fold up the vinyl here, and you kind of just slide it on and try not to damage it. So there you go. Now you grab your figure. Let's grab old Alonzo here. And whew, that is a load. That is huge. And I was going to say, you're going to have a lot of trouble getting this guy to stand without an actual stand, but actually it's not bad. Look at that. Even give it a little bit of a nudge, and he's doing okay. I'd almost say he does better without the stand. Oh, that's still pretty sturdy. So you got the entire giant, tall Manta stored in the backpack on the back. If your stalker has a weak hip or leg like mine, you might want to go backwards. You're going to probably have to fold him forward, bend him forward. And then this gun, which I guess I could, I don't want to. I don't want to risk busting this guy's thumb, because I know how fragile these original thumbs can be. But even that does not look too bad to me. Just kind of holding onto the gun and the clip like that. Yeah, that looks really cool. I think it's so cool that you can remove the machine gun from the Manta and have it be the Joe's weapon. And kind of the silver lining of breaking the little remote thing off is I think that looks even better without the little deal hanging off on the back there. Looks more like a real assault rifle. So that's the 1984 MANTA Mail-Away. Really cool, exclusive offer. Even if it didn't collapse, that'd be a really cool G.I. Joe vehicle to have, but the fact that it can collapse sort of into this backpack, enormous backpack, I just always appreciate options. Doing things like this in order to change up the display a little bit, because you can have your figure on a Manta for a year, and after a year you're going to want to change it up a little bit. So being able to collapse it and have the figure carrying it like this, it's really nice to be able to do something different with it, and then maybe the year after that deploy it again. So that was fun. I think Manta is a Joe vehicle that slips through the cracks a lot of the time because it wasn't available in stores and not everyone got to have one. I didn't even have any friends who had this thing growing up, so it was really cool to be able to take a closer look at it. Hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you all so much for contributing to the channel. Really appreciate that. Hope you're enjoying these Patreon exclusives. And until next time, Nerdmas Day.